All right, more guys to the stage. Wave two. Welcome to the show, Nate Cotman, Rod Richard, Jason Jackson. Welcome to the show, my brothers. How
Yes,
are
sir.
you?
Feeling
Doing
good,
well,
feeling
doing
amazing.
well.
Doing well.
Yes,
Y'all look
sir.
amazing, man. Skin glowing. The
Appreciate
vibe
it.
is right. I
Bless
appreciate
you,
that,
man.
man.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. So continue the conversation about identity. I think this is a good mix. We got different walks of life, different pursuits in terms of what we all do for a living. I want to kind of shift the conversation into how identity plays into how you show up in your business, in your work. How does your work or your business influence your identity? Any noticeable changes that have shifted who you believe you are once you got into the industry that you're in? And we'll start you, Nate. First of all, what do you do, man?
Yeah, so I'm in real estate and credit, and then I do a little bit on social media as well. I would say for me, when I think about identity, identity has a lot to do with who we were designed to be, right? And so for me, I had to understand the difference between identity and purpose, right? Identity is who we're designed to be. Purpose is what we're designed to do, right? So for me, when I think about, my identity, I would say that I'm a spiritually, mentally, and emotionally aware servant, son, and friend. That's my identity. So when I show up in what I do, I show up as who I am, right? That doesn't change regardless of what I do, right? So the impact that I have on the people that I come into contact with based upon who I am or who I was designed to be is always the same, regardless of what space I'm in, whether I'm in real estate helping somebody find a property, whether I'm helping somebody repair their credit, whether I'm speaking life into somebody, right? It's all the same for me.
Right.
So I'm a strength and conditioning coach. So I work with athletes primarily youth athletes. I do some stuff with adults, with pro athletes, but the bulk of the people I train are kids. And I think identity-wise, it was a struggle for me because I cared so much about the kids. I made strength and conditioning coach my identity. When people ask you, when you introduce yourself, you're like, "Hi, my name is Rod. I'm a strength and conditioning coach." You always say like your title. And I think for me, because I felt like my passion and my purpose is to serve this next generation of young men and women, that doing that as a strength and conditioning coach, I felt like I was hitting the mark, right? But I kind of allowed that to pull me away from what I would consider my real identity is, which is being a father to my children.
Wow.
And realizing that, I had to kind of stop serving other people's children as much as I was serving my own. So when you say identity, I kind of think like you hear identity crisis and it's like a negative connotation to it.
Right.
But I think it's a crisis because it's something that you need to do and there's work to do it.
Right.
And maybe fighting against that work is the crisis. And then for me, it was a struggle that I had to overcome.
So the disruption was healthy. You had to come to grips with it.
100%.
Okay.
100%.
Got it. Mr. Jackson.
Wow. Well, I'm happy to be here, first of all. This conversation is just dynamic. I'm really excited about it because it's one of my favorite topics. I invest in real estate, right? So I'm a real estate investor, but I also speak and I teach, at conferences and trainings and things of that nature. So, I consider myself to be a professional encourager. However, I have a background in education, right? So those are all the things that I've done as it relates to vocations. But the reason why I think identity is so critically important is exactly, as you said, we are in what I like to call as an identity crisis in terms of everybody's searching for who am I? Whether it's reinventing yourself or rebranding yourself, and am I who they say that I am, right? And sometimes, we as men especially hear a lot of lies about, what it is to be a man or what a man does or what a man looks like or what a man has. And so then we start to define ourselves by objects or by accomplishments or by, what we do. A lot of times when men get together, we feel like we're measuring one another by what we do. And that's not who we are, right? And so for me, it became very relevant really at the age of like 30 when I really first learned what the definition of a man was, and then I realized that my identity wasn't tied into what individuals say I am or who they say I am, but what the one that created me says that I am.
Right.
Because how can anyone else truly define you if they didn't make you? You know, and the irrefutable evidence for that for me is that when I look at my fingerprint, I realize that out of 8 billion people in the world, that nobody has my fingerprint. Even if I had an identical twin, they still wouldn't have my fingerprint. So my father didn't have my fingerprint, my mother doesn't, my kids don't. And so therefore, if I'm one of one, then I'm a masterpiece. And so the only way I can really and truly know who I am is to know who the creator said I was, because that's the one who made me.
I want to ask you guys, how important is it for other people to understand your identity? We had the word clarity has popped up. Identity is would you say is what I am, not what I do.
Yeah.
Men have egos, right? And sometimes it becomes important for us for other people to understand what's important to us, right? And if our identity is important to us, do we care what other people think about our identity? Is it important for other people to understand what we know our identity to be?
I mean, I think no, it's not, right? Like it should be within you, right? How do you feel about yourself? How do you feel about how you're showing up in the world? Real answer is we have egos, right? And so we do care to some extent how other people view us, right? And the way that we move each day or the way that we show up in these different spaces is somewhat based on how people are going to view us, right? I think the more clarity you get on your identity, the more you show up as your true self, right? Because you don't feel any need to be something else. You just are who you are, like authentically, unapologetically. I'm just going to be me, but that takes work, right? And a lot of that work we shy away from, right? We'll just fit in rather than standing out.
We'll just fit in rather than fitting in is comfortable.
Yeah.
Standing out is it can be awkward. Nate, as we were talking before the show, purpose is heavy. I feel that even with the amount of traction that it has now, and I know what God has it designed to be, it's a heavy thing to be unapologetically you and tell the world that you're doing that. In your house, in your home, where you typically would have the respect of those living there. It's sometimes I struggle with, is this really me though? When it gets hard, because it's easier to go. Corporate was easy, and I was pretty good at it, but it was easy because I had the reps there, and it didn't require me to. It really didn't require me to trust God with every decision. And I know that's a trite thing. I trust God. No. Consistently, the check was hitting every couple of weeks. Now, over time, they look different, and I was aware of what my boundaries were that would cause me to lose that, but it's pretty predictable. This stage of my life out here on this journey is teaching me so much about what I was not and how God is using this to be what I am supposed to be. And sometimes that's confusing because the muscle memory says, do this, do this, do this. Here's the result. Sometimes you don't know exactly what the result is going to be when you trust in God. And you almost feel lost, right? And that goes back to, I forgot who had the conversation about faith and trust. I think Javan was saying that about faith and trust. One thing I learned in this phase is that I was living off of my parents' faith. I realized that maybe a few years ago, but even as an adult, because of what they demonstrated to me throughout my life, hey, could you take this one up? Like sending them to God for me as if that was the thing to do. Now I understand interceding and all of that, but the burden of me working directly in partnership and submission with what God has for my life that is actually reframing my identity has been it's been interesting. It's been interesting to say the least. let's talk about some struggles, man. We kind of got in that with the first wave of the panel, but like, where at what point in life did you come to that crossroads where maybe you weren't sure of the identity, you didn't want the identity? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say for me, it was at a place in my life where everything that I had placed my identity in was taken away. And it was at that moment that I struggled the most, but it was at that moment that I also received clarity to realize that everything that I had seen as my identity really wasn't my identity. And I had to go to the source in order to rediscover what that was. Yeah. Right? There were times where I had lost maybe a job that I found my identity in, right? And so no longer could I use that as my crutch for my identity, right? I had nothing, right? And so I really had to come to a place where I said, yo, who am I? Who was I designed to be? And that's when I went to the source, right? And it was at that moment where I discovered, who I was designed to be. So I just believe that there are times in our lives where God will take away everything that we place our identity in so that we can discover it.
Got a question just for the listening audience and for the watching audience. We do have a mic in the audience, so
Yeah, I had a question for this brother here.
let's hear it.
So would you say the struggle, is that considered the identity crisis? Would you say that? For everybody that goes through, when men go through that struggle, is that the actual identity crisis that we go through? Would you say that?
I think it could be a part of it. I think as men, there are multiple times in our lives where we face what they would consider to be identity crisis, right? Some of those moments are when something that we've placed our trust in or we saw as our identity was taken away, and now we don't really know who we are, and we go searching for who we are. For other men or at other stages, it might be a midlife crisis, right? Where maybe the kids are out the house and, the marriage isn't the same as what it was before. Maybe our bodies aren't performing the way that it did before. And now we have a life crisis going on. I think as men, there are multiple stages where we find our identity in so many different things. Our work, our women, our ability to earn, our body's, ability to perform, being respected, right? Men find their identities at different stages in their lives and so many different things. And so when those things begin to transition, as life does, we find ourselves in that identity crisis. So I think that it could be a part of it, for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
Thoughts on when you came to a crossroad where you had to come to grips with your identity or shifting it, adjusting it in some way?
Yeah. Well, I will say this. I feel like I was fortunate to really have a sense of identity when I was, I think I was like 9 years old. And one day my mom had my clothes laid out for me for school. And they were nice, clothes. She'd always make sure I had something nice to wear. But I told her, I said, Mom, I don't think I really want to wear these today. And she said, well, baby, why? And I said, because they're going to talk about me. Oh. And she told me, she said, well, let me tell you something. She said, people will talk about you for the rest of your life. They're going to say one or two things. They're going to say something good or something bad, but they will talk. So you do your best and leave unto the Lord the rest. So I said, okay. It was kind of, eye-opening because I'm like, dang, they're going to talk about me for the rest of my life? Like, this ain't going to stop. This ain't just elementary school. This ain't just this location. This is going to happen for the rest of my life.
It's the foundation.
And so she said, yeah, it's going to happen for the rest of your life. And so at that moment, I realized that, it wasn't what people said, but it was more so what did I say about myself? Was I doing my best? Was I being my best? And then I had a friend that told me one time we were talking, and he said, I know this isn't proper English, but he said, be who you is, not who you ain't. Because if you is who you ain't, then you ain't who you is.
Run that back.
That's a
And
bar.
I had to listen
That's
to it
a bar.
again because I knew it was in proper English. But he said, be who you is, not who you ain't. Because if you ain't who you is, then you is who you ain't. So in other words, keep it real. To thy, as Shakespeare said, to thine own self,
Be true.
be true.
Right.
And so it was at that moment that, as an adult, I realized that regardless of what my position is, regardless of whatever I have, right, you really find out what you're made of when all that you have is taken away, right? Because you still are who you are. And a lot of times we misuse the word identity. That's why it's an identity crisis, and that's why we're searching, because we're trying to figure out who are we? Who are we now? Who do I identify with, right?
Who do I
That's the
identify
key word.
with?
Who do I identify with? It's not that. No, who are you? A zebra is a zebra, giraffe is a giraffe, a flamingo is a flamingo, a monkey is a monkey, right? Because it's understood. Now they evolve and we become the best version of ourselves. And we have different stages in our life to where we're a young man or we're a single man or we're a father or we're a grandfather. And so we have different levels in our life, but we are who we are. And it's not until you understand that as self that you will continue to struggle. Because, when I presented to those counselors, the title of that particular workshop was Self-Identity Equals Self-Worth, the key to success for young African-American males. And so, being in education and having a background in coaching, I realized that young adolescent men, and even myself at that time, was trying to figure out, right, who was I? What group was I a part of? Or how did I connect? Or, and it's all because we want acceptance, right? Everybody wants to, like Shears, go where somebody knows your name.
Yes, everybody
You know
knows
what I'm
your
saying?
name.
Had a group or the environment to where you can be accepted. But what happens when you go somewhere you're not accepted? You still have to be you, and you have to stand, as you said, unapologetically on who you are, right? And so that's what it is. I just, try to keep it simple so a child can understand. A rose is a rose. By any other name, is still a rose.
Still a rose.
Right? And so, just really having the self-identity of who you are gives you your self-worth.
I want to come back to a point that identifying with versus identifying as, but we got a question.
I have a question for all you brothers. As I've heard the conversations tonight, it sparked in my mind, like, how do you cope with that boundary of who you are at one time in your life, right? So I've heard be who you are. But then when you're confronted with a different environment, and then you have to show up as that person, but it's not hitting the same as it was before. So how have you coped with when that boundary is challenged or that boundary is disrupted or it has to reform to get back to, like, maybe the direct question is, how do you cope with it? And then on the other side of that, have you found that you're a different identity, or are you still the same person?
I'll jump right into that one. It'll be more transparency. When faced with that opposition, I shrunk. Became a lesser version of who I knew to be, and what I knew was expected of me by those that mattered. I wanted to appease those that were in my immediate circle, and again, it's the corporate life, right? I'm hanging out with these guys. I'm that guy that's I'm giving them some validation because they think I'm cool, and I'm hanging with them because I think that's a way to the top, because that's the boys club, right? And how did I deal with it? Double down. And how did I justify it? I got promoted, got more money, and all of it yielded emptiness. Then I got frustrated because I'm achieving these goals that I set out for myself that aren't common, and it's still not yielding joy or happiness. And now I'm coming home mad. I'm coming home late. I'm coming home mad. I'm working more hours, trying to figure it out, trying to fix it. Shovel kept working. Hole got deeper, and it was that it resonated with me about the God taking things from you, right? Now I thought I was happy about my job being taken from me because I've been saying I'm gonna be an entrepreneur, I'm gonna do all these things because that's really how I want to live and breathe. But I always had to check. So now that God has called my bluff, we do. Still got the family to lead. I got 5 children, 1 in college, 1 heading to college, one in 10th grade and two, you know. So it's I'm figuring it out. And I know that wasn't the answer, but that was my transparency response to what you asked.
That was definitely the answer. Is personally, I'm a lot less interested in who we are when things are stable, as I am in understanding how do different people deal. Like that's where you really get tested.
Yep.
Is in that moment where you have to decide: is who I was sufficient for the next thing in life, and then how am I going to show up? So that's why I asked that question. That was precisely what I wanted to understand.
Gotcha.
So if the other brothers would like to share maybe how you cope with that, I'd be interested to learn that.
I would definitely say that different environments require a different aspect of who we are. Now, notice I didn't say version of who we are, because that's different, right? Requires a different aspect of who we are. I think that when opposition comes, it's an opportunity for us to discover creativity and create solutions, right? But I think it's always important for us to remember still who we are at our impetus, right? So going back to how I define myself, or how I believe God defines me, right? Spiritually, mentally, and emotionally in tune, servant, son, and friend. So regardless of what's going on in my life, what challenges I face, how dark it becomes, right? That's how I believe I'm supposed to show up. I think that challenges really reveal more of who we are, right? And I believe that it's a beautiful thing, even though it's uncomfortable. I think that it's a beautiful thing. And so we allow those challenges and that darkness to really refine us into who we're really called to be and what we're called to do. I'm thinking about you, man, and it's like, even though some things were taken away, I believe that God is using this to push you into what you're called to do.
Yep.
Right? And I also believe that this is an opportunity for you to discover more of who he's called you to be. Yep. You know? And so we embrace the darkness and we allow it to develop us.
Dope.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think for me personally, when you know your identity is what you think it is, and then you transition into something else, and you have to kind of try to hold on to who you are, who you've been, and then also build on that maybe in a different arena. For me personally, and I've talked to Derek about this. I walked away from a job in professional sports when I found out I was gonna be a father. Like it was one of those things where my dad was around, but not enough. He's great now, but as in my youth, I remember him not being around, and for me, it was a no-brainer. Like I couldn't miss being. And if you guys are familiar with the life of a professional athlete or somebody in professional sport, you're gone. Like you're not around. You make good money, but you don't get to see it because you're gone, right? So I made the decision to be with my family, but I walked away from a really good job and I had no prospects. Like this is what I had been working for my whole life. And so I didn't have something to fall back on, but I knew what I was capable of and I knew who I was. And so when I chose my family, I also chose to depend on myself, and was able to build a company and do all these things and, got really successful, but I found myself filling back into the same shoes that I had been previously wearing, right? And I had to step away again. But again, showing up as who I am, no matter what the situation is, because I think we talked about calling, we've talked about purpose, we talked about who you are, like your essence. I think that remains no matter what situation you are. The more you uncover it, the more you get clear on it, the more you can show up as it. In different situations, as you said, different aspects. I don't like the versions of yourself thing either. I think as men, we wear many hats, right? We have a bunch of different things that are going on with us. We're good at a lot of things. We can be great at a lot of things. And it just depends on the situation we're put in, right? Like we can be a Swiss Army knife, right? We may be really good in this one situation, but I think when we're faced with adversity, we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to get stronger, right? We find out what our weaknesses are, right? And our weaknesses can now become strength, because had we stayed where we were and not transitioned, then we wouldn't be any better, right? Like he said, it's just kind of comfortable, right? It's easy. You can just do it, wake up, no stress, and just do it. But if you can be better, why not, right? Why just be good if great is an option?
Why just be good if great is an option? I think that's a good place to put a pin in it for this wave. Gentlemen, again, I appreciate you guys being on the panel. We're going to welcome the next group at this time. I am going to get up myself, so you guys won't be bored with me. Let's bring the next group to the stage right now. Appreciate you guys.
They tried to count me out, I'ma gon' count me in. Fill up my bank account, now I got something to spend. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I just pull it out and count for nothing when I'm feeling great. Give my baby little more, just to spend it.